Hey, welcome. So today we're going to unpack something you probably see every single day. Maybe even something you're eating right now, just a simple sandwich. But inside that humble meal is a story that's thousands of years in the making. It's a story of survival, of empire, of industry, and all the quiet little innovations that allowed humanity to, well, conquer the world one bite at a time. I mean, really think about it for a second. That bread, that filling, it is the final product of this huge historical journey. It's a solution to a problem that has been bugging travelers and soldiers and workers for millennia. How in the world do you eat when you're nowhere near a kitchen? All right, let's get into it. So our story doesn't start with a recipe. It starts with a race against time. See, the biggest challenge for any group of people on the move was just stopping the natural process of decay. Before you could even think about exploring or conquering or trading, you first had to solve the puzzle of how to keep your food from just rotting. And what's so wild is that these ancient techniques, drying, salting, freezing, fermenting, they are still the absolute foundation of food science today. These weren't just cooking methods. They were humanity's first real logistical tools. By pulling moisture out of food or using salt to make it impossible for bacteria to grow, our ancestors could suddenly store food for weeks, months, sometimes even years. And that little innovation didn't just prevent hunger, it unlocked human mobility itself. And this is a perfect example of that early food engineering genius. I'm talking about pemmican. This stuff wasn't just dried meat, it was basically a perfectly balanced, super energy-dense power bar. The people who made it understood that for long, hard journeys, you needed way more than just protein. So they mixed powdered meat with high-energy fat and then added dried berries for vitamins and carbs. What you ended up with was a food that was light, incredibly long-lasting, and nutritionally complete. It was survival, perfectly packaged. Okay, so let's jump forward to the medieval era and see how this idea evolves. As towns and cities started to grow, a whole new set of problems popped up. For workers and travelers, the challenge wasn't just what to eat, but how you were going to eat it without plates or forks or even clean hands. And the solution they came up with was brilliant. Just make the container part of the meal. It sounds pretty wild, I know, but it was such a practical solution. I mean, think about it. In a world without disposable packaging or easy access to clean water, why would you create waste or something you had to wash? You could just eat the dishes. And this simple idea led to some of the cleverest food designs in history. These things weren't just meals, they were like self-contained eating systems. You had the trencher, which was literally a plate made out of stale bread. It would soak up all the amazing flavorful juices from the stews and meats piled on top. And then, at the end of the meal, you had this flavor-soaked piece of bread to eat. No waste, no cleanup. The Cornish pasty took it even a step further. You see that thick, crimped crust? That wasn't just for looks, it was a handle. A tin miner with his hands covered in all sorts of nasty stuff like arsenic and dirt could hold the pasty by that crust, eat the delicious filling safely, and then just throw away the contaminated handle. It was food, packaging, and a hygiene tool, all in one. All right, now let's scale this whole idea up, way up. We're going from a single miner's lunch to the rations for an entire empire's navy. The age of sail demanded a food that could survive not just for a day, but for years at sea. And the answer was a food of, let's call it, extreme logistical compromise. Something that sacrificed literally everything for the sake of just not spoiling. And this is it, hardtack, also known as ship's biscuit. It was made of just flour, water, and maybe a little salt. And it was baked over and over until it was as hard as a brick. It was cheap, it stacked perfectly, and if you kept it dry, it would basically never, ever spoil. For centuries, this stuff was the fuel of global exploration and warfare. Soldiers in the American Civil War called it tooth dullers and worm castles, and they often had to smash it with their rifle butts and soak it in coffee just to make it chewable, all while skimming the bugs off the top. But this logistical win came at a truly horrific price. A diet of just hardtack and salted meat had zero vitamin C, and as a result, scurvy absolutely devastated crews on long voyages. Just look at that number. It's staggering. More sailors died from this single nutritional deficiency than from storms, shipwrecks, and all-out naval combat combined. By solving the problem of spoilage, they had accidentally created an even deadlier problem: malnutrition. The real solution came from a challenge put out by Napoleon Bonaparte himself. He desperately needed a way to feed his massive armies on the march. And in 1809, a candy maker named Nicholas Appert won the prize by inventing canning. Now, this was a fundamental shift. Instead of removing water to stop decay, Aprit's method used heat to kill the microbes that cause decay inside a sealed container. This was a complete revolution. For the very first time, moist, nutrient-rich foods could be preserved, basically solving the scurvy crisis and changing the game for long-distance travel forever. And that brings us to the Industrial Revolution. This is where the biggest logistical challenge wasn't distance anymore, it was time. The invention of the factory whistle and the standardized workday completely rewired how and when people ate. Before factories, the main meal of the day, which they called dinner, was often eaten around 11 in the morning. But industrial schedules pushed that main meal all the way to the end of the workday. And this created a brand new problem, a long, hungry gap right in the middle of the day. And so a new meal had to be invented to fill it, lunch. And it had to be fast, it had to be cheap, and most importantly, it had to be portable, because workers usually lived way too far away to go home. And with this new meal, of course, came a new piece of gear. The metal lunchbox was way more than just a container. It was a symbol. Carrying one meant you were a laborer, someone who couldn't afford to go buy a hot meal from a restaurant. It was a tough, practical tool designed to protect a worker's precious food in the rough environment of a mine or a factory. So what exactly went inside that lunchbox? Well, the perfect industrial food. The story goes that the sandwich was made popular by an aristocrat who wanted to keep playing cards without stopping for a proper meal. So he asked for some meat to be slapped between 2 slices of bread, and just like that, an icon was born. So yeah, its origins might be in high society, but its destiny was in the hands of the working class. When you think about it, the sandwich solved every single logistical problem of the industrial lunch break. It was perfectly self-contained, right? The bread acts as an edible plate, just like that old medieval trencher. It needed no cutlery, no table, and almost no cleanup. And then, with the rise of industrial bakeries pumping out pre-sliced bread, it became incredibly fast and cheap to make. It was the ultimate expression of efficiency, a meal perfectly designed for a new world that ran on a clock. And that brings us right back to where we started. The next time you hold a sandwich, or really any simple portable meal, just take a second. You're not just holding your lunch. You're holding the result of millennium of problem solving, from the ancient wisdom of Pemmican and the cleverness of the edible Pasty to the hard-won, brutal lessons of hardtack at sea and the relentless efficiency of the factory floor. It's a whole history of human movement and work and survival, all wrapped up and ready to go,